Thank you, everybody. Just a brief note, one of the anticipated panelists, Frances Ann Solomon, could not make it today because of a family emergency, so our thanks to her for originally volunteering for this panel. I think it'll be lively because, quite frankly, the conversation kind of started just before the mics were turned on, and I'm just sitting here watching it happen, so it should be fun. Just to introduce the panelists in order. On my far left, we have Matt Wiele from Foresight Pictures. He's produced a couple of movies called Monster Brawl and Exit Humanity, and he'll be showing a clip from them and talking a bit about how he's put this together. Beside him is Casey Walker from Cave Painting Pictures. He's financed a movie called A Little Bit Zombie, which at least a portion of the financing came from his website, so I'm sure we'll be very interested in speaking to him about how he's done this. And to my immediate right is Steve Hnatiuk, who's chairperson of the board of Arrowleaf Entertainment Properties, an investment opportunities venture capital fund, and he'll be talking about what it takes to kind of interest this kind of money and this kind of investment, especially on a company-wide basis. So to get started, let's start with Matt. I must say that, no, let's start with Casey. I particularly did this just to throw them off balance. Casey, you have something to show us from A Little Bit Zombie? Do you have
I have no idea.
You have no idea? Okay, this is a little bit like a late night talk show where they don't know what the clips are.
Oh,
well, okay, that's a great place to start.
You can see the trailer for A Little Bit Zombie on the screens around the conference.
All right. Now, it says that you financed this partially from your website. Can you tell us a bit about that? $1,000,000movie.com was your website.
How many filmmakers are actually in the audience, just so I know who I'm speaking to, and then how many are straight up producers? Cool. So you guys know in this country it's very difficult to make a movie unless you've made a movie. So I had to get around that, and I've been directing professionally. I've been in the industry for 8 years, directing professionally for 5 at that point, and no matter what I got behind, it just wasn't going to go up to the next level. So necessity's the mother of invention, and I keep saying that every time because it really, really applies to us as independent filmmakers. And around the time that I had what I thought at the time was an amazing script, a website called the $1 Million Homepage came out, and this guy in the UK who wanted to go to school but couldn't afford it really, put up a single web page, and he sold pixels. If any of you know, a pixel is a very, very, very tight, it's like a pinprick. And he sold 100 of those in a block for $100, and in 3 months he made $1 million. And I thought, hey, I can do that with film. So I applied the concept to my idea, which is called MyMillion-Dollar-Movie.com. And instead of using pixels, I used frames because it was the only increment I could kind of tie to what I was doing. And from there, we put out, this was before Facebook even existed. MySpace was just kind of kicking off. YouTube, it was something that I was watching but not using because I think there was only like 2 million people on the planet adopting it. There were certainly not even 8 hours a minute going up at that point, I can tell you. And so in 2006, September 2006, I put up a static web page with a press release that we put out over 3 or 4 wires, and overnight we made $20,000. And then we realized we were screwed because we had the amount of labor that it would take to operate that website was certainly going to far surpass $20,000. So we stepped back, we kept the conversation going, and you're gonna hear me say that a lot, conversation, with the people that had started to support us and the members of the press that were interested in speaking with us. And we took some of that money and we created an automated site. And then in the early winter, late winter, 2007, we launched an automated site, and from there it snowballed really quickly. a guy who bought a frame. There became so many 6 degrees of separation. The guy who bought a frame knew someone I knew from high school who knew someone else who had a friend in the UK who then bought a frame, who then let the Times of London know that he'd bought a frame. They ran an article, and all of a sudden we were in 26 countries in a week. And I was making another show for Marvel Media at the time, and you can believe how not so happy Matt and Mark were that here I was making a show for them, yet my phone and with the production phone would not stop ringing because press around the world wanted to know what the heck was going on. And I wanted to know what the heck was going on because, again, as much as I planned, none of this had ever really been done before. So this, again, the snowball started rolling and money started coming in. And when I started this, I knew that I didn't want a public company, and I knew the rules of public investment. So I structured everything so it wouldn't be considered an investment. When you bought a frame, you're buying a physical piece of property that then you rented back to me. And I used that, the profits that you generated were not, they were a rental or a lease on that. And you could take that frame back anytime you wanted. And it was fine, it was legit, it was sound. And then the lovely government folks at the Ontario Securities and Exchange Commission, who, and I bless them for this because their job is to protect consumers against, you know, the lovely Nigerian scams and whatnot. Well, they set their sights on me, and it got messy and mean and weird. And at one point we had the press release drafted like filmmaker goes to jail for his dream. And so my lawyers were fantastic. They knew that they had something that was precedent, that was gonna be heard loud around the world as far as entertainment and financing went. And as much as I love them to death, and they weren't charging me anything because of this monster, they then realized how, like, the line that we were poking, that was about, it was more of a dragon that could breathe fire very far, that was about to wake up and consume us all. And they were 100% confident we'd win, but it was going to, no matter what, no, even if they wiped out all fees, they looked at 2 years and at least $100,000 in hard costs, no labor. They were going to charge me anything, just hard costs. And I considered jail for a little bit. And then we came to terms with the fact that maybe the profit and the change and everything, we spoke with them on and we were pleasant terms this whole time. We asked them that perhaps instead of the money coming back to the people that bought frames, that they would receive their initial purchase back, like, thank you very much, but after that, all the profits would go to the environmental charity of their choice. And in 2008, when this was all blowing up, messy, well, green still is big, but green was a big buzz at that time. Everyone was going green. Al Gore was kicking ass across the spectrum, and we got lucky and they went, we like green. Now, the biggest problem, even though I came out of this somewhat unscathed, is I lost momentum. And where people would come to a website, I fought tooth and nail not to get the website taken down, but they couldn't buy anything. So I have stats where I had upwards of 150,000 people on a good month over this 8-month span were coming to the website, and I couldn't sell them anything. And it sucked. So
could you sell advertising?
We could, but at the same time, if we were to sell ads, and we were approached by several people, once they got into the nuts and bolts of what we were doing, they were afraid of the legalities and how they get wrapped into it. Believe me, I thought of that very quickly.
So this was all before Indiegogo and all the stuff we're
yeah,
hearing about now, where people
Kickstarter, none of that existed.
So you were really the trailblazer in terms of using the internet to help finance a feature film.
Trailblazer, I was more of the
guinea pig?
Stupid rhino blaring through the forest, just knocking stuff over and making the mistakes and being wounded as I went. And then I spoke with all of them briefly as they were putting their stuff together, just as pitfalls. And I never have any problem telling people about what to avoid when it comes to crowdfunding, because I've made every mistake possible in that world. Yet I still managed to come out unscathed somewhat. So fast forward to 2009, I've got about $80,000 that I've raised, and we've been spending on keeping the project going. It basically became our development money. I started looking around at other areas for financing, and I found the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation, And I was born in Northern Ontario, so that kind of makes me a shoo-in for this amazing program. And they have a program called the Emerging Technologies Program, which allowed me to access up to $1 million for a local spend in Northern Ontario to train. There's training aspects, hiring, and just to spend across the board. And again, you really are just looking for that seed money. So I've been directing this whole time, pretty much full time, while doing this in all my other spare time. And I took the money that I'd been desperately saving, not buying a house or a car or having children or getting married or having a life. I put that as I have a distribution company, I put that in as my distribution advance, therefore triggering. I got certified by CAPCO or bona fide by CAPCO as a Canadian distributor. And I put my advance in, which triggered my tax credits and the NOHFC. Now, combined with my $80,000 from my website was the financing structure for my
Is
film.
now a good time to put up the financing structure if we could find it?
I swear I sent it in.
Do we have a slide that could be put up? Ta-da! Does that look familiar to you?
Yes.
Yes. Who else?
So those are the numbers. We don't shy away from them because, and as much as there's a lot of song and dance in our industry, that's what I made the movie for. And the 1.95748860 is on public record because it was, a lot of it was triggered by government funds. Actually, almost, I'd say 80% was triggered by government funds. Now, a lot of those government funds are kept aside for other triggers with Telefilm or ONBC, and they're all really good programs. I'm a guy that doesn't like to be told no, so I just kind of figured out how it worked, and it really came about where I had all this information all over the floor of my loft, and I was standing on my kitchen table with a laser pointer, and I knew I had the pieces of the puzzle, I just didn't know how they fit. And I was drinking really cheap scotch, and I was just trying to put the dots together, and I finally found it, and it really was like, it wasn't some weird, like, beautiful mind and images and stuff came together, but it worked, and then I threw out all the other papers, and I had just these 4 pieces.
Ultimately, as I look at this, I see that about $85,000 came from your crowdsourcing.
Yes.
Which is a kind of tiny amount of the total budget of the movie, all things considered, but I gather a lot of it had to do with the publicity and the momentum that it gave you.
Yeah, the reason, I guess the basis of our success is that we started an audience for a project before it was made, well before it was made. Matt and I are both genre filmmakers, in case you guys didn't know. I made as a comedy horror. Matt's made straight up horrors they're just coming off a huge festival run. I'm just starting one, and we know our audience. So for us to take this kind of risk outside of the telefilm market where I can't speculate how it's done because I've never done it, but for us, we know our audience, therefore we know what to give them. And I don't believe, and this may mean that not one of you financiers or producers will want to talk to me after this, but I don't believe in ROI. Return on investment does not apply to independent filmmaking anymore. It's still an aspect of of what financiers want to hear, and it's a buzzword because it's what people know, but I believe in ROE, and it's called return on engagement. And the more you engage people, the more they're going to engage back to you. And your biggest brand ambassador is the people that engage and want to go out and tell everyone else. So thankfully, being genre filmmakers, it's a little easier for us because if you know what a fanboy is, which I'm pretty much considered one of them, we love sci-fi, horror, the combinations of that with comedy and all these things. We love to talk about them. A lot of us have disposable income. Most of us have girlfriends. Not a lot have children, so you can imagine that we knew who we were speaking to, or I really knew who I was speaking to and how to give them what they want, because I couldn't, as much as my film is very general and gives it does have a broad audience, I knew very specifically who that audience was, and I started giving them something very early on. With transmedia being the buzzword as well, I don't know where that's going to settle yet, but it's one we all understand. We created additional content, a total of almost an hour of clips that are rolled out as we go. And that's not just behind the scenes, that's stuff with characters. And we've saved prime bits which build character and give people a segue into the film before the theatrical release. We have 6 very, very unique pieces, some of which are seeded into the film. And our fan base, which is now global, we have over 5,000 people in 4.5 months on our Facebook page. Our trailer got 12,000 views in the first 24 hours on Vimeo, and I don't even know where it's at on YouTube right now. And it's because I happened to come into the conference just when the social media lecture was going on. But we've been doing that for 2 years. We've been engaging. I've been doing it since 2006, but I've really had the money and the script to make it all happen now. So
I want to come back in a few minutes and talk to you a bit about distribution and how you are reaching your audience, and you've begun to talk about that. But let's give somebody else a chance to talk for a couple of minutes. Matt, you also are making genre movies.
Yep.
And I believe I coerced you into bringing a trailer for Monster Brawl, which, by the way, had a run in Ottawa at the Mayfair Theatre.
Yeah, it just wrapped up last week. It was one of the screens we played.
So I wonder if we could show that, and maybe then you can talk about how you put it together after everybody has a look at this.
They've been out there for centuries, lurking in the shadows, rotting in our stories and myths, and buried in our nightmares. For the time will come when monsters will shape the fortunes of all.
Good evening, monster fans in Canada, Newfoundland, and the United States of America.
Dave Foley, Art Hindle, Robert Maillet, Kevin Nash, Jimmy Hart, Herb Dean, Jason Brown, featuring Cyclops, the Mummy, Lady Vampire, Zombie Man, Witch Bitch, Swamp Gut, Werewolf, Frankenstein. 8 legendary monsters from around the world summoned to the ring to determine the most powerful monster of all time.
I'm gonna be late for the Monster Brawl!
It's the ultimate fight of the living dead.
He's gotta throw everything at this fat son of a bitch!
Monster Brawl.
Anyone who watches Monster Brawl is going home in a body bag.
So as you see, we make really serious films.
I must commend you for anticipating that Telefilm wasn't going to fund this.
I actually work, my 2 partners are guys who've existed in the independent world for a while, John Geddes and Jesse Cook. And they struggled making shorts, really self-starters, raising financing to do that, professionally gambling for a while to fund shorts. Somehow that worked out for them. And they shot their first feature about 4 years ago. They raised just under $500,000, and they call it the worst movie ever made. And unfortunately, didn't end up making them money. So they approached me. They're lifelong friends. I've known them since I was probably 5, 6 years old. And I come from a marketing and advertising background and business development background. And they kind of came to me and they said, we got our ass kicked on the first one, and we really can't do anything else. This is our whole life, as I'm sure Casey knows. Once you've got the bug, you're in it, and you have to find a way to make it work. So they approached me and said, let's start a company, let's raise some money, and let's do it all over again. So I should precursor this with something that I think is very key. We had a year of failure before we ever saw a year or 2 now of success. We actually launched our company as the recession launched, and in tandem we struggled because we were already too deep into it to really give up. But we kind of heard the whispers forever that it's coming, and then it really came. And we tried for a year still as hard as we could, full time, while doing jobs on the side, of course, just to pay the bills. But we tried to raise $1 million initially, $2 million to shoot 2 $1 million features. And we did everything from, things that aren't legal with the OSC to things that are very legal with the OSC. And needless to say, that just didn't work out. We ended up having, kind of the culmination was in June of 2008. We put on a very expensive investment event at Steam Whistle Brewery in Toronto. We're very good friends with the people that own that company and run that company. And so we put on a really spectacular event. You know, we had cigar sponsorships, beer sponsorships, and, you know, Richard Krause, who many of you would know from the film community, hosting it. And we basically got up and pitched our business plan. And we couldn't afford to go the route of public investment from a prospectus route, so we had to do an offering memorandum. So we were restricted by the Closely Held Issuers Act, where you have to have less than 50 investors, accredited investors who you have some sort of relationship with. So we kind of worked our inner networks to access those people. And long story short, it just did not work out. It was the worst time in our generation, or, you know, since the Great Depression in the early 1900s, really, to try to raise private financing, let alone for film, independent film, and film like this. So that was a huge failure, but I hate that term because it ultimately led to our success, which was us going back to the drawing table for 3 months, revising our plan. And the biggest thing we took away from it was we were trying to sell units initially at $30,000, which you don't get a retail buyer at that, even if they make 200 grand plus a year. A lot of people just don't really have 30 grand laying around. So we went back to the drawing table and drawing board and said, okay, let's raise more like 600 grand. We'll shoot 2 $300,000 features. And we did, you know, we revised our offering memorandum. We had a 50-page booklet. And that was our key, which is, we talked about this on the phone prior to the event, was we really had a very solid, thorough, and incredibly clear business plan of how this was going to happen. There was no, we've got a movie about monsters fighting to the death and it's going to do great things. There was nothing to do with that. It was all about, in our case, it was return on investment, because we knew that people putting money in wanted to get money back. I think with crowdsourcing and the genius of what Casey did was there's a real hook, and it comes down to that marketing effort where, yeah, I'm gonna sell frames of a movie. That's genius. People love it. I'm gonna buy 10 frames. I own 10 frames of that movie. With ours, it's people just blindly investing, saying, I need to make my money back and I need to make some money on that. I'm gonna get an executive producer credit. I might get to walk on a red carpet at a small genre festival. These types of perks. So we really, you know, focused on that, and we raised the money in 6 months after that. And the recession was still going on. It was alive and well, and almost helped us because people weren't seeing returns, and rather we're seeing losses on their traditional investment strategies. So an RSP, where people put, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room have RSPs, where that's your safety net, and that safety net took a 30, 40, 50% hit in a very short period of time. So people were so, and I remember feeling that I have no money. So I can imagine people who have money were very, very worried because that nest egg is just taking a giant tumble. So at the $5,000 level, we sold 120 common shares, or packages of units basically, and raised the $600,000. And so that equated in the end to about 43 investors. So we were just shy of the 50 mark. We did have one that was exempt by, I can't remember the particular rule, but if they invest over 150,000, they don't technically count in that group of 50, but we raised the money, and we were raising money up until 2 months before shooting, really. And we started with Monster Brawl that you just saw here, and we shot a second film, Exit Humanity. And much like our business plans, and exactly as Casey said about the genre audience, we knew our audience. The 2 directors I work with are fanboys. You'd look at them, you'd never think they'd have a figurine in their life, and they've got walls of toys and DVDs and all these types of things that I just, you know, was never into. So it was a really nice coupling of the 3 of us. And so we knew right away that these films had to have at least some recognizable names, whether they be big or small. So comedians like Dave Foley were in, Art Hindle, who's a classical Canadian guy. We had some wrestling guys because we really wanted to tap into the wrestling market. In the US, I would argue, you know, a guy like Jimmy Hart, who maybe not everybody in the room knows here, you go to the US and he's going to be better known than any one of the actors in that. And I mean that. The audiences are giant, and we saw that in our US deals. Robert Maillet, the large guy who plays Frankenstein.
So obviously you shot this union, even though it had a budget of
we had to go union because the 2 directors knew we needed talent, and they'd worked non-union before, and there's a million great actors out there, and you know those that aren't in the union are good, but you know there is something to be said about the pros, and so as a result, we really knew we needed the talent in these, and we booked in both shows. You saw there's about 8 different names you can play off in different sectors. And in Exit Humanity, we also got Dee Wallace, who was the mother in E.T. She was in Cujo, The Frighteners, like she's a genre icon. We got Bill Moseley, who's in all Rob Zombie's films, tons of horror stuff. We got Stephen McCaddy, who's also in A Little Bit Zombie, an amazing Canadian character actor from The Watchmen and 300. Pontypool was a huge one. And also we got the voice of Brian Cox. And anyone who knows Brian Cox, he's a class act. He's in the new Rise of the Planet Apes. He was in the Bourne series. And we got him as a narrator, which was also a hook, because we could never afford to have that guy on set. So we booked him for a day of voice, just like we did in Monster Brawl with Lance Henriksen, who was in Aliens, and another huge name in the genre world. And it started to snowball, same thing. We were putting out press releases as we were going to shoot Monster Brawl, and we had coverage on every major genre site literally as we went to shoot our first day. So our audience was truly built before, and I always said with my background, I said, guys, like, we have to tap into the fans, and they knew it, but if you don't get the fans, no one's going to steal your movie, as we said, and and no one's really going to care, because those are the people.
Before we started, they were saying if nobody's stealing your movie, then you've done something wrong.
Yeah. So we shot the films back to back over about a month each, with about a month and a half, 2 months in between, and we wrapped up at the end of 2010, edited, did all post through 2011 festival tours, and now we're in the middle of sales. We did our own Canadian deals for home video, broadcast. We did our own little theatrical run. In the US, we had a broker sell both films down there.
I think we have the same broker.
Are you working with XYZ? Yeah. Nate Lawton down south, a great young hustler. And we did our own UK deals. We did our own Germany Benelux deals. And then now we've started to work with a Canadian outfit broker to do the rest of our sales. So
all right. Steve, at a more of a macro level, I guess you get all kinds of people knocking on your door. What kind of advice would you give them in terms of what they should bring to an investment fund before they come knocking on the door?
Well, first of all, I think you've got something on Arrowleaf. Do you want me to quickly introduce it as context?
Okay.
So Arrowleaf is a private investment firm based in Western Canada, backed by high net worth individuals. Our CEO, Sarah Shack, is a former film commissioner and a force of nature herself. She's really something, which is what got me interested in. So Sarah couldn't be here today. I'm the chair of her board. Also on the board is Jason Priestley, myself, another person from the investment world, Glenn Paradis, who's a hedge fund manager, and Valerie Gratton from the Canadian Media Fund is an advisor to Sarah and Arrowleaf as well. So we are looking to invest in entertainment business opportunities. So we don't view it as project finance. We don't view it as just financing, great creative ideas. When you're an investor, you're looking for business opportunities, to really just be extremely simplistic about it. And I've spent about 20 years financing emerging technology companies. In the last probably 4 to 6 years, content and technology have been merging around digital media opportunities. And so you're seeing a coming together, sometimes a clash of these two worlds. I think Arrowleaf is much more focused on what I would call traditional entertainment opportunities. But when Sarah first approached me about she had an earlier fund called Arrowleaf Fund 1, a predecessor which focused on projects predominantly in Western Canada. The focus now is international. But my concern was, well, films lose money. And that's a perspective that's a broadly held perspective of the investment community. And unfortunately, that's a bit of a ball and chain that the industry has to drag around with it. But in spending more time with Arrowleaf and looking at things, I've come to change my view on that, and I realize that, like in any industry, there are entrepreneurs, and in listening to the guys here, I sense that there's entrepreneurship seething from them. They're going to chew through walls to figure out how to make a buck and get their projects done. And the comment about you can't raise money for a film if you haven't already produced a film. It's often the same in many industries. In the tech industry, serial entrepreneurs get financed because they've proven that they can do it before. But first-time entrepreneurs get financed as well. But out of 200 or 300 deals that you might look at, you'll invest in one. So you have to ask yourself, What does it take to be that one when you're sitting down with an investor? You've got an unusual financing landscape in the entertainment industry that we don't see in other industries. You know, it's done on grants and tax credits and all of these other sources of money, which aren't as focused on a return on their investment as private investors are. I might love your idea, think it's really creative, you know, but if we can't have a discussion about how it's a business opportunity for you, for everyone involved, for us, the conversation is fairly short. Getting your financing isn't equivalent to succeeding. That's just the start of the road. Once you've got your financing in place, you got to figure out how to produce a good product. You know, to use, you know, a more generic, like a really good product. So is your management team capable of doing that? You know, why do I, you know, what reason do I have to believe, whether it's prior track record, you know, uniqueness of your skill set, you know, the orbit of people that surround you that have been there and done that before if you haven't done it yourself. So management matters. Then what market am I going after? You know, you guys are producing in specific genres. You got to be a subject matter expert in your market. Really understand who's going to buy, who's the customer. You refer to it as audience. I think of it as your customer. And there might be multiple customers out there for you in multiple distribution streams. So what are you going to do in online? Might you be able to license some of your characters out for interactive and gaming? Are there other product placement opportunities? All of these things, because by and large, as an investor, I'm not looking to just invest in a project. I want to invest in a team and a business opportunity that has some legs beneath it to go forward. Because, you know, you talked about engagement with different parties. You know, you want to build a relationship with people that you can be in business with, have some fun, make some money along the way. But it's not just about financing dreams. It's about financing compelling business opportunities. And you have to really be in that mindset. You got to think about why what you're doing is viable as a business, and you have to do that for your own survival, not just in order to be able to attract investors. Because there may come a day when all of the very friendly, you know, grant type and non-repayable or very lightly repayable forms of financing start to tighten up even further than they have today. We've seen this in the tech industry. Not uncommon for there to be some form of government financing for early stage R&D, which is kind of like financing at the most, you know, early stage of your creative process on a project. But that's just one leg of the stool. To really actually take it to the next level, you have to have a real business opportunity, not just a cool piece of technology or a cool creative idea.
You mentioned that the overall perception in the private equity world is that movies are kind of a big loss. It's not a good investment. You have a slightly different attitude when it comes to programming that's produced for television.
I think it tends to be very specific to the business opportunity. So I think that by and large, entertainment is not well understood by the private equity industry or private debt providers because there's a feeling that it's a very difficult place to make money. Yet there are entertainment products and ancillary products to the core entertainment properties all around us, everywhere we go. So somebody's got to be making money. So if you can come and tell us how, you know, a television project is going to be of interest. Here's the sources of capital we have lined up. Here's who we've got around us. This is how we're going to market. Here's the partnerships that we've got for distribution, either in place or lining up. The relationships we have. We've got good talent attachment to this. In a capital efficient way, I'm going to build something of value and quality. You know, if we start to get a sense that that's what you're trying to do, that's an interesting business opportunity. So, you know, that could be in, you know, it could be in interactive entertainment, it could be in television, it could be in film. But I'd encourage you to think outside of a project financing mentality and thinking about this project as one step in the business that you're building.
should people be thinking about trying to get an investment in their company or in a slate of projects that can be cross-collateralized and kind of make sense?
I think it depends very much on how you want to structure yourself. And sometimes that's also going to be driven by the other sources of capital that have come into the deal. Arrowleaf is interested in providing predominantly debt financing for later stages of production and for distribution rollout. So kind of last money in, and in some cases, some of the earliest money that comes up. That's just the way the debt business works. Just like getting money from your bank, they expect payments to start fairly soon. Except this is a more patient form of debt capital, but private debt still works that way. I would say in a minority of the projects, we'll consider taking an equity position, but that equity position, people say, well, what does it take to get you interested in being an equity investor? What it takes is something that's going to make that equity worth something over a longer period of time. Equity financing is an unusual way to finance a project that's fairly short-term in nature, because when you put, equity is your highest risk and hopefully highest return capital, because you're prepared to lose it all when you put it in. So that might be a place where you want to become an equity investor in, an underlying business that's going to produce a slate of things over time, and then potentially a friendly source of financing for future projects on the debt side. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does actually. Well, not enough that I could put together a package of this. As a theoretical construct, it makes sense. What these guys are doing also kind of makes sense to me, because I think if you can keep your production levels at a certain, you restrain them, the horror genre, sci-fi, they have fanboys around the world, and if you can reach them. I was talking to someone who opened a little independent rep cinema in Toronto with a projection booth, and he's tried everything from first run art films to classic stuff, and week in, week out, what generates his most consistent audience, because they just talk to each other, are these really obscure genre films like Bong of the Dead that he booked from Vancouver, a self-made movie. And he'll get 100 people to show up very consistently with no advertising, no stars. This is a real community of people who talk to each other. And it seems to me that, if I was trying to pitch this gentleman on an investment, I kind of, if I was specializing in that kind of genre stuff, I'd have something to say, because it seems to me at a certain price point, unless you're really inept and put out a bad product.
And that's not unheard of.
That's not unheard of. It can happen.
Especially in our genres, a lot of fans believe, well, if they can do that, I can do that. And then without experience, without a lot of it's experience, and then a lot of surrounding yourself with the right people. Like, nobody makes a film on their own, and if they believe that, they're a retard. Pardon my politically incorrectness, but it's very, very true. It is, like you say, Steve, you're looking for the team. Now, I may be the face of the team, but I'd be full of crap if I didn't tell you I surrounded myself with some insanely talented people that they weren't believing in me, they were believing in my ability to pull it off, but we had a really good script, and because of that, I had award-winning people across the board who came and helped me out. So
I'm interested, after the product's made, and you've made the best product you possibly can for the dollars that are available, how do you get it out into the world? How do you compete with Warner Brothers releasing their movie on 4,000? Is it all through the internet and word of mouth and communities? I noticed Fantasia Film Festival logo came up.
Yeah, there's a giant.
Can you talk a little bit about how you've got your?
Absolutely, it goes back to the audience. It's same with the buyers. There's distributors that distribute very specific genre content. So in Canada, we're working with Arrowleaf Entertainment. Now, their content, mind you, ranges from old school genre stuff right through to fitness lines with the Pussycat dolls and everything else. But they're a publicly traded stars company. They're a giant company in the US that has a Canadian operation. We have a great relationship with the executive director. He bought the first film that the guys I work with produced. And he's chomping at the bit and has been since we pitched him on the ideas to really nurture these products. So you don't go to the Warner Brothers, you go to the Anchor Bays. And in the States, we were working on Monster Brawl with a company called Image. And they have a giant library, again, a large funded company. But with Exit Humanity, we're working with the largest horror website in the world. Is called, the worst name to do anything but horror, but bloodydisgusting.com. They get about 3 million unique visitors a month, which is, they're the largest site out there as far as I know in the genre.
Oh, they are.
Yeah, and they've since opened a distribution company based off their digital success. And one of their biggest title to date, I would say, they've picked up is a film called The Woman that played at Sundance 2 years ago. There was this huge controversy because some guy in the audience stood up and said it was demeaning and this and that. And it's a Jack Ketchum story, who's an acclaimed author. And so they're labeled Bloody Disgusting Selects. Also, Salient Media got on board for Exit Humanity. They're not out trying to buy the artist because they're not going to do a film like the artist, and they're never going to afford a film like the audience.
Their distribution company's called Bloody and Disgusting Selects.
Bloody disgusting.
Yeah.
No end in between.
Yeah, exactly. So, and but again, they paid a great rate up front. They have a huge network to market to, so they've already got their audience. They've got 3 million people a month coming to their site.
We only have 7 AMC theaters here in Canada. There's like 200 chains or something in the States, and they have a partnership with AMC. So for as far as a rollout goes, one screen in every one of those complexes, like we can't even come close to that up here.
Yeah, it's the same with our other distributors around the world. Like I would say the closest one to a mainstream distributor, or actually 2, would be Momentum Releasing in the UK, which is an alliance company. So they've got a huge catalog. And then we worked with Splendid Entertainment in Germany and Benelux, and they have things like The Expendables, and they have the rights to The Expendables too.
You both have produced Canadian content movies.
Absolutely.
100%.
Is that an advantage to you? Are you making TV sales? Does it mean anything?
Yeah, we did our own broadcast deals with Super Channel. TMN, I think you guys are with TMN.
We were with TMN and Movie Centre. We did sales outside our financing structure before we ever went to camera, based off of our casting and our script.
Yeah, and we did the opposite, where we produced the content and then sold it, which again, both have advantages and disadvantages. But one thing that we've done, from raising finance to doing every job we could possibly do on our sets, right through to doing our own sales. So we have worked with agents. They did our US deals, they're doing some more deals, but we took it on ourselves, which again, pluses and minuses. One minus is you go to pitch a company like TMN, and I don't know if you had this experience, obviously not if you're working with them, and it could have been that they just didn't like the content, but they said, oh, why don't you have sales representation? Well, we don't need it though, we're doing our own sales. And some companies look at that as, oh, you can't get a sales agent.
Yeah, they look at it as a weakness.
Yeah, we're looking at it like, no, we're not giving away 20 to 30% of our revenue to someone who's just gonna go sign a licensing deal. It doesn't make sense.
There's an example here of how you might be able to get creative at that stage if you are working with a sales distribution agent, for certain countries or regional markets. And you think that the pound of flesh they're going to take is a little bit too high. But you could, it's possible that you could do a 3-way deal where you would come to a private financier, not with a pitch to be an equity investor, but when I refer to short-term debt, this is a great example of doing something like this. So you've got your sales distribution agent, and we've actually done a couple of these teed up. Rather than having them cut the check directly, we'll cut the check directly to you, and we would structure a contractual obligation where the first part of the proceeds coming back from their sales efforts. And if they're a good quality distributor, and we can all take a high degree of comfort in having them as a business partner, you could get a private investor to put the money up for that. They essentially are not really underwriting, but contractually obligating to pay first part of the proceeds or on a revenue share, overweight to us until we're out with our initial capital investment, and then whatever return we're looking for, and that maybe happens on a share basis or built on the next chunk of proceeds. So
that's where Canadian TV sales would probably be very reassuring to you, because they're not likely to disappear like some of the international sales agents.
Well, and the networks are getting their incentives, right? Like they have to program X% Canadian content. A company specific to Super Channel, who went through bankruptcy protection basically, is now mandated that a set percentage of their revenue and or profit has to be put back into Canadian productions.
It's the same with TMN and Movie Central as well.
Yeah, but to your point, it's really going to depend on the quality of the parties involved, just like the quality of the parties on the management team. Is the agent that you propose to partner with a reputable player in the industry that can really deliver the goods? If they can, you have potentially a bankable relationship there that helps you get the latest stage of your project financed, right? And fairly efficient.
I've got a 10-minute sign flashing. It's probably been up for 5 minutes already. So very quickly, is there anybody in the audience that has a question that they would like to ask the panel? We can barely see the audience.
We were that informative?
Nothing? All right. Just quickly going up
Can I say one thing before we go?
Yeah, one final comment.
Even though you guys come here to listen to how we've done it, I truly believe that there is no right way to make a film. So take whatever we've said and whatever you've coupled from other people and make it your own, because it's changing quickly. The structures that have worked in this country for the last 20 years, no one wants to admit they're about to disappear, but it's coming very close. So if you're not ahead of that curve, you could be left behind.
Matthew, final words?
One thing I would say that I think we could definitely agree on is, as technology increases, opportunity increases, but so does risk. Because we're out competing with people who had 10 times the amount of money we had, and we're trying to produce a product that looked like it cost 10 times as much as we had, but then all of a sudden the people behind you who had 10 times less than you had, thanks to consumer technology, can go out and buy a $2,000 camera that looks beautiful. And don't get me wrong, the look is not what sells, but a lot of movies that get made for no money that can still get broadcast deals and still get home distribution do not have to have actors, and technology is a huge part of that. Same with distribution.
And appropriately, I'll leave the final word to the financier.
Like any entrepreneurs out there, when you pour your heart and your soul and your own money and several years of your life and money from your family and friends and from other sources into a project, do yourself a favor and think really hard about how you make it financially successful, because it needs to be a business opportunity for you. Otherwise, it's just called a hobby. And nobody wants to put money into your hobby. They want to put money into you if you can really create something great, and there's a business opportunity for you and your partners, whether those are financial partners or other business partners, to succeed as a result of that effort.
Well, Steve, Matthew, Casey, thank you very much. I think it was a lively discussion, and you obviously answered all the questions because there weren't any. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you.